Hello, I'm Charles, and I'm a beekeeper that loves old bee equipment. As I work on the 2021 honey harvest, I wanted to discuss honey uncapping knives and some of their history. Langstroth hives have been around since the 1860s, but the tools to work those hives and harvest from them came along later over time. In the beginning, people just used steak knives for uncapping, and people also used steak knives as the earliest hive tools to pry apart boxes before the invention of the modern honey tool. Regular knives are not efficient with honey capping, and they struggle to cut wax and stay sharp enough to keep on capping. Wax will cake a blade and just ruin the edge on it to where it can't keep cutting and you'll have to keep cleaning off the knife. I've divided this video into two sections: cold knives and hot knives. The effectiveness of these knives show that they really don't vary much in design because they're that effective. They tend to copy each other by design, and I don't think there's been much room for improvement. But you can see with some of the cold knives, there are some modern innovations in uncapping tools which are very effective. Cold honey knives came before hot honey knives, the first being the Quinby honey knife. Moses Quimby is most famous for inventing the modern smoker, but he also invented the curved-bladed uncapping knife, which was marketed by AI Root. You can see the curved blade, which was used to rake frames where the comb just wasn't thick enough for the broad part of the blade. These were marked with Medina, Ohio, but it didn't have the Quimby or Root name on them. And these were sold from the 1870s until sometime after 1910. Next, we have a cold AI Root knife. I am not sure how well you can see it on camera, but this has the old AI Root logo stamped right into the blade, the clover logo. These were popular between 1910 to, I'd suspect, well into the 40s, just not with that logo anymore. And here we have a Sears knife. Sears has a long history of having companies white label their products from tools to computers. This handle tells me that it is likely a Dedant knife that was white labeled as a Sears knife. You can find Sears branded beekeeping equipment as late as the early 1980s if you watch eBay long enough. There is plenty of new old stock that pops up. This was part of their Farm Master series that was popular in the 50s and 60s. See Sears Roebuck here. This is a contemporary cold honey knife. Serrated edges are helpful, but I tend to reserve this knife to cut comb when I remove hives from walls. These are very sharp. Ask me how I know. These scrapers have been popular for uncapping what the knives struggle to. Often you'll have some comb that just isn't quite thick enough. The blade will go over it. It'll get most of the cappings off, but then you'll scrape it what little is left. And here we have a very modern tool. I think these popped up only in the last decade. These are known as an uncapping fork, or colloquially as a bear claw. They work very effectively. I bought one about 6 years ago, and I finally did manage to break it. I had the weld come loose right here in one of the corners. That was able to be repaired by just putting a screw and nut in both sides and tightening it. I made sure to do both sides because I imagine the other will fail at some point. You know, it's a cheap tool, but it works really well, and I would argue, as far as cold knives go, this is your most effective one. That one really does the best job when it comes to uncapping. Now, we'll talk about heated knives. First, we'll talk about the steam knife that I restored in the previous video. This is an AI Root steam knife and steam kettle. These were made from about 1890 to sometime in the 1940s. This was the preferred way to do it before the invention of the electric honey knife. Now, when I did my research on steam knives, I came to the discovery that they are not extinct. There are still people who use them. Predominantly, they're popular in Australia among older beekeepers still. I couldn't tell you why that is. But they will use a modified wallpaper steamer or a modified steam vac to produce the steam instead of using kettles. Because I would argue kettles are dangerous. But I can see just by looking at it that the design of the steam knife inspired what we'll talk about next, the Pierce knife. Now, the Pierce knife was invented by Paul Pierce. He invented it in the 1940s, and basically what it is the electricity comes through, goes through the heating coil, which is in the blade. Simple, but very effective, and it is a great knife. And what tells you it's a great knife are two things. One, all other uncapping knives are based off of this design. They haven't really innovated much in the 70 years that they've been around. On top of it, this is a 40-year-old Pierce knife and it still works just as effectively. In fact, I had a slightly older one that was close to 50 years old. It was an heirloom that just burned out this year. And I think it was because it got put in a dishwasher, which don't do that to the knife. This here is a more modern Pierce knife. This one was ordered this year, and I used it for the honey harvest. You can see that the handle's changed a little bit. The Pierce company is under new ownership. However, the gentleman that took it over, an engineer that loved the knife and more or less purchased the company and the patent. It's still a great knife. And I went through the honey harvest this year, and I had bought a generic one for just $30 on Amazon to replace it, and the damn thing broke by the time I got through 6 supers of honey. The handle had dislodged and broke off because of the rivet that attaches them. Just went to garbage, and you'd think, okay, I'm good. It definitely won't do this again. And I ordered another cheap one. And wouldn't you know it, the heating element broke off even quick. It could be broke and just wouldn't work even quicker. The thing I just want to tell everyone is stay away from cheap Chinese heated honey knives. Two from 2 different manufacturers. I'm not that unlucky. That's telling me something about the quality. The Pierce blade still made in America, still made using solid manufacturing. I promise you they didn't give me anything for me to say that. But it's a testament that these knives have been around for so long and that everything is basically a knockoff of them. That's how good this knife is at what it does.